Howdy folks, this is Justro at Metcalf Mills bringing you Fun Fact Friday, because this day and time facts are hard to come by. Got a good one for you today. I'm excited to share it with you. It's some useful information. You may never use it, but I hope you enjoy it. But before we get into that, I want to remind y'all that we'll be going live this Sunday, the 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We got some giveaways, so you don't want to miss it. When I started planning putting my mills together, they require different lengths of bolts, and most of them are pretty long for the frame. The problem I run into is I couldn't find the bolt sizes that I needed. So it was a pain in the butt. I run all over the place in town and even tried to order stuff online, and I couldn't find the size bolts that I needed to do what I needed to do. So just like always here at Metcalf Mills, if we can't find what we need, we make it. I've always thought that making bolts was a necessity. Even when I built that first mill when I was 15 years old, I could not find the bolts that I needed. Those custom made long bolts threaded so far on each end. I just never did get into making bolts or doing any threading until now. And the reason I'm doing it now, when I couldn't find these bolts, I was talking to an old buddy of mine, Danny. If you remember, him and Mike come down and helped me band them millstones. Danny, he said what length bolts you need and how many you need, and I'll make them for you. So I told him, and then next thing I know, when they show up, he brings what we need, and he shows me how to make bolts. And he said, I could make these for you, but he said, I can teach you how to make them, and you'll always be able to. So I just want to give a big holler out to Danny for showing me the ins and outs on bolt making. It's going to be a handy skill that I am so thankful to have. Hats off to you, Danny. So to make bolts, you have to have steel. Round stock, this is 1/2 inch round stock for the bolt itself, as well as square stock, which is 1/2 inch thick by 1 inch wide stock to make your heads out of. Now, I like square-headed bolts. It's what was always used in the olden days. I guess that's why I like it so much. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to be making square-head bolts. Now what we've got here is the other end of this stock. And Danny, this is the way he showed me how to do it. What you do is, you cut your 1 inch increments, not all the way through, only part way. Then you center drill the holes for your bolts. And then on the back side, you countersink for where you weld the nut to the head of the bolt. This makes it so much easier to do when you got a long piece of stock to work with when you're working on these. Now the next thing we're going to do is where the saw cut this, it's a rough cut and it's got some meat hooks right there, and them meat hooks we don't want on there. So what we're going to do on both of these is knock the meat hooks off, all the burrs, as well as trim down the end a little bit, just grind off a little bit so that it'll fit in here nice and snug, but not too loose. Now, this is the end that I took down. This is our nut. It's got the countersunk. On this side, we want to drive it on like this with the countersunk out so that that gives us something to put our weld bead in. See, the end of the bolt is now nice and flush with the end of the head. Trusty old Pittsburgh threading kit, compliments of Danny. What we're gonna get is a 1/2 inch bolt thread die, 1/2 by 13. That's the threads we want on these bolts. So that's what we're gonna be using. We're gonna put our bolt in the vise, tighten it up. Right there, all right. Got our 1/2 by 13 die. On these dies, one side of it is more shallow than the other, and the reason for that, that's the side you want to start cutting threads with. You want to start with that shallow side and let it cut deeper as it goes. So that's what we're going to do. Start it on as straight and square as you can. Real important to start it straight. And once you start cutting threads, you have to back up after about every 1/2 turn and break the chips off, because it'll cut. A little burr of that steel will come up, and you just back up to break the chips off. A little cutting oil. So there's the start of our bolt. I'll still have to weld around right here to weld the head onto the nut. I'll weld that and then grind it down to where it looks good. And here's the threaded end. Threaded about 1.5 inches up on it there. But that's it, folks. That's our bolt. Alright folks, that takes care of our Fun Fact Friday. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember, it's better to have it and not need it than it is to need it and not have it. This is Justro at Metcalf Mills. I look forward to seeing you next time.